Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Geoff Koshin West. Thank you for joining us for May 17th, Sunday of ITB Sunday School. Today we're going to be, like other Sundays, we're going to be focusing on a topic having to do with integral transformative bodywork. And today we are focusing on the topic of the four definitions of spirituality and what they mean, how they look, what to do with them, all that jazz. So to start out with, let's talk a little bit about what is the definition of spiritual. We use this term spiritual. Now, there are four different versions we're going to kind of touch on, but even this word spiritual is kind of difficult to kind of put our hands on. We're going to be using this definition in general when we look at each one of these characters, because the four definitions have something to do with, I mean, clearly the term is used in every one of these guys. We want to give some kind of ground kind of definition of what this thing might look like, what this definition of a general definition of spirituality could be. So to start with, it's having to do with whatever we consider sacred or whatever we consider to be of great value. From one extent, or from one perspective, the definition of spiritual is whatever we deem is of greatest importance, of greatest value, of whatever we would call sacred or extremely precious to us, something along those lines. So sometimes things like compassion are considered sacred. Love in its different versions are considered sacred for some folks. So when we look at a general loose definition of spirituality, that's one way that people kind of identify that which is sacred, that which is of greatest importance. Another way that it's talked about is, another way that it's defined is having to do with unity, having to do with some type of experience of an individual feeling a great unity with everything, or a deep connection with everything, a deep interconnectedness, interdependency with everything that's going on. We oftentimes use the term, like, once again, unity or a unifying experience is oftentimes a term that comes up when people start talking about a spiritual experience or spiritual orientation. And then something that goes right along with that unifying experiencing or a unity experience is an experience of something greater than us. And so traditionally, oftentimes we use terms like God or some character or being that represents that unifying experience, or that higher power, that greater force in the cosmos, in the universe, in the world, in living things. But it can also just be a creative impulse, a creative force. It can be the evolutionary experience. So it can take on this concept of relationship to something greater, something larger, some greater force in the cosmos, our experience of that. That also is connected to most people's perspective of what they call spiritual. Along with this is often side by side that arises with this is folks' their relationship to that which is awe-inspiring to them, things that they are just in awe of, or they are feeling a sense of profundity in relationship with, the inexplicable. So this is also a way that is commonly termed for spiritual. Another way that is often also talked about spiritual having to do with, and this is a much more kind of like traditional use of the term spiritual, it's actually relating to what one person may consider spirits or spirit beings or something along those lines. And these can be we have in several traditions, a spiritual being, a spirit could be considered a ghost in some people's perspective. It could be the spirit of an elemental force in another tradition. It could be an angel in another tradition. It could be something like a guide or awareness that contributes to your world and your well-being. These are considered spirits, and it's your relationship to those things. And once again, these things kind of very much overlap. All the general definition stuff we're giving right now of just the term spiritual, these kind of overlap each other. They're not rigid categories. They definitely kind of span across a spectrum of what people call spiritual, or their spiritual experience, or their spiritual orientation. as we're going to learn today, they don't have to include all these general definitions. They don't have to be defined by that. That if you don't really include one of these or any of these into, if you don't include all of these in your what you consider spiritual, then that's normal and perfectly fine. We're probably going to bump into some of the territory that you are, but in a lot of these ways that oftentimes we do find that one of these kinds of ways that we talked about them already does kind of speak to us about what our experience of spirituality is and what that feels like. And so you don't have to have all of them, but usually one of those is included in that conversation. So that's kind of like a general definition of spiritual. And usually because the term spiritual is almost immediately associated with some type of relationship to higher power or force in the universe, or even religion, because of that connection, a lot of folks believe that if they are agnostic or atheists, then they don't have a spiritual orientation. And one of the beauties of Integral is that it teaches us that that's possibly not quite true, depending on how we translate the conversation. So we'll kind of get into that when we do start to talk about different, one of the other different stages, or one of the other different types of the definition of spiritual, these different ways that spiritual is used. So why don't we go ahead and jump on in. So the first stage here, or the first, our first definition of spiritual that we're going to take a look at is the term intention. So intention is definitely a kind of like a way that people use this spiritual experience or create a spiritual life or create a spiritual world. When it comes to intention, this intentional or this tone, they approach the world, they approach activities with a spiritual orientation, meaning that they proceed with a sense that whatever they're participating in has a sacred quality. So anything they consider a spiritual act or a part of their spiritual practice is performed in a sacred act for some outcome. Okay, now that can be, of course, very signature for that individual. Traditionally, or the majority of the time, when it comes to people's spiritual orientations, there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of very, very, very personal experiences that go along with it. So that being said, the intention side of it is what a lot of people do know as, and a lot of people do connect with as far as religion is concerned. We go to, when folks go to church or go to mosque or go to temple, it is to join in some sacred activity, something that is more meaningful than, maybe brushing our teeth, or more meaningful than vacuuming our carpet. So we are assigning, with an intention and with a tone and with a kind of like a momentum, we are assigning sacredness to a specific activity for some reason. Okay. And the reasons can be, once again, very nuanced, very signature to the individual. But oftentimes this kind of approaching with a mood or a tone of something being sacred, we see very closely related to our religious experiences or religious practices of spirituality and of sacred. So that's one that a lot of folks kind of get on board with, and a lot of us can identify with. I know definitely there's times and periods where we move into these experiences. I perform activities that are meant to be meant to weigh a little bit more as far as the meaningfulness of it. So you may notice that in this definition of spirituality that you have in your life with intention, you do approach certain things with a different level of care and concern, compassion, sacredness, profundity, and maybe even awe. So as we kind of move on, this is one of our first kind of engagements of the 4 different types of spirituality that are often kind of practiced and popularized or advocated for. This one's relatively simple for a lot of us. The approach, when it comes to the fact that we're approaching something with sacredness, this can be, once again, really kind of anything can become a sacred act. Going to our garden can be a sacred act. In fact, in one of the other conversations we're going to have in a minute about spirituality as a line of intelligence, where we take our acts of sacredness into the world and into our lives is also a sign of that spiritual line of intelligence being maybe more inclusive, more mature, maybe another term would be more evolved or more refined. So as we kind of notice where we take that intention of sacredness is also telling about spirituality as far as a line of development and where we bring that, and also where we identify as something not being sacred. And so it is definitely kind of an interesting type of a question to investigate that experience and to identify how we bring the weight of sacredness to certain activities. It's extremely normal. There's nothing wrong with weighing things differently. That's a perfectly fine approach for the majority of us in our own practice, and is appropriate for a lot of us as we are progressing in our spiritual practice. And so we're not trying to suggest that with some of these other conversations of spiritual development as a line of intelligence, or when we start talking about stages, we don't want to say one is a bad version of it, but we do want to recognize that there are just simply different forms of this spirituality and of this practice. So our first one we want to kind of lay the groundwork for is understanding that we make choices as human beings to identify that which is sacred in our world. And when we start to do that, no matter what it is, when we start to aim sacredness and weigh certain events in our life with more sacredness or more profundity, or having more care and concern for those activities, that is one of the ways that people identify as being spiritual, is they're bringing their spirituality, they're bringing their deep care and concern, they're bringing their compassion, they're bringing their sense of profundity and sacredness to an act. And so that is one of the definitions of spirituality, of being a spiritual person or doing a spiritual practice. Next up, that one's pretty self-explanatory, I hope. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. You can do that through the comments here. You can do that through emailing us at embodyingitb at gmail.com, and we'll receive your questions there, and we'll hopefully be able to respond to them and give you some information and maybe make some clarity. So the next definition we'll look at is also a very, very common one that people identify, and this one is called an altered state. And so this has to do with the integral, as far as the integral map is concerned, this has to do with states of consciousness. And states of consciousness are relatively simple to explain. They are situations where the human brain, if you did not know, your brain has waves. It has this pattern of movement and of activity. And we can measure that through hooking you up to certain sensory systems, and they will tell us what brainwave pattern you have. Now, if you didn't know this, when you go through different experiences in your life, your brainwave pattern will change. So when you are awake in a situation like this, where we're talking or we're interacting or you're hearing someone talk, your brainwave will be functioning a certain way. If we were to stop talking and you just kind of focused on thinking and experiencing and maybe remembering some of the things that I've shared here today or that you've experienced here during this conversation, your brainwaves would change again. And if you started to shift from that and started quote unquote daydreaming or moving into a more creative mind, your brainwaves would change. And if you moved into then prayer or meditation, some mantra or chant or something like that, your brainwaves would change. So the point is that as we kind of refocus our mind, as we aim our awareness and concentration, brainwaves shift. Okay. And when we shift these brainwaves, when these altered states occur, this means that our brain is processing reality, I mean, taking in reality, both internal and external realities, taking that information in differently. So you are kind of, it could be said that you're not exactly the same person when you are going through these altered states of consciousness. You are experiencing reality different. You're taking in data differently. Your whole body sensory experience, your touch, your skin, your ears, your eyes, your nose, your tongue tasting things, your ears taking stuff up, taking in information. That has changed, that has shifted. So how you process all that information coming into that brain, that beautiful, fabulous central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, is slightly altered. So you perceive reality differently. And for some schools of thought, it is suggested that you're perceiving reality, maybe more of reality, maybe a deeper layer of reality, maybe a spectrum of reality that through normal, like this conversation experience, through normal modes of experiencing through the brain, you are missing. And so in altered states of consciousness, we'll shorten that to ASC, altered states of consciousness. During ASCs, we experience reality quite profoundly differently. Your sensory experience can be different. Your auditory experience will be different. There's so many different changes that'll happen during your experience of this altered state. And that altered state can tell you a very, very interesting story. Altered states can create, no doubt about it, altered states because reality is kind of shifting and changing. Some say reality is bending. Some people are saying reality is becoming more enriched. However you want to phrase it, one way or the other, one of the dominant experiences that happen when we go into altered states is a sense of unification, is a sense of profundity, is a sense or an experience of deeper unification or different things along those lines. So that is definitely an interesting component that comes up when we do altered states of consciousness activities. So the definition when it comes to altered states of consciousness, ASCs, there's a number of different ways for people to go into altered states of consciousness. Actually, there's in the history of humans trying to figure out what's going on in reality, altered states of consciousness has actually been a major contributor to decoding that. So ASCs can be seen consistently through every religious tradition. And when we go even farther back to the ancient peoples' traditions of planet Earth, we definitely see altered states of consciousness showing up on a regular basis. Altered states of consciousness, the most common way that people move into altered states of consciousness is twofold. The most common ones we have on record is, first and foremost, the most dominant is breath. The use of breath in a number of different ways. And then the other dominant version is through substances, usually mushrooms of some kind, but also marijuana has a pretty ancient history as well of creating altered experiences and different things along those lines. But the altered experience, the ASC experience that occurs between marijuana and mushrooms is pretty darn different. And while marijuana has a pretty powerful soothing experience, we don't have a lot of folks that have really wild visual experiences unless they're taken through some type of training or some type of process. Mushrooms, on the other hand, does have a little bit more of a profound effect, even just from the chemistry perspective of things. Marijuana does definitely have a little bit of a different, or I'm sorry, mushrooms has a little bit more of a profound effect chemically on the human brain, and thus causes a lot more of a altered state and altered perceptive experience of reality, both internal and externally. So in our human history, substances have been a major focal point for our development. And there is also this suggestion that one of the reasons why we have evolved in the way that we have, one of the major reasons why we have this very dynamic brain that we have, is that our ancestors were on mushrooms a lot. And that perspective comes from, oh man, what was the guy who did that? He'll come to me in a second. Sorry about that. Anyhow, Altered states of consciousness are what a lot of people identify as spiritual experiences. In fact, a lot of people do look at the substances themselves, ayahuasca, peyote, different types of quote unquote magic mushrooms or mushrooms in general, different types of substances, marijuana, even tobacco can have an altering experience. There's other things that we can smoke or ingest and eat that cause altered experiences. And in our human experience, in our human traditions, we do find a fair bit of populations and groups identifying these substances as sacred because of the experience that comes along with it. So usually the equation here is the substance is taken, the substance gives me an experience of deep unity, deep connectedness, deep insight into reality and situations going on, and that gives me more control or more power or more health and safety or intelligence in my experience of existing. And so I identify that substance as being a part of that story. So it's extremely commonplace in the history in our human history of substances to identify marijuana, to identify mushrooms, to identify ayahuasca, these different things as actually sacred substances. And, you know, I mean, there's nothing really all that wrong with that idea. I think that's perfectly appropriate. And I think I don't get too cranky about people extending the sacred out to these objects, to these substances, because quite honestly, you know, they are precious to a certain extent. And if the reality, if the anthropology and science is correct on the fact that the use of hallucinogenic mushrooms and other hallucinogenic substances have actually contributed to the magnificence of the human brain and its complexities, then, you know, I think that's perfectly fine to assign a sacredness to that substance, seeing as how it has created our current manifestation in this incredible capacity for awareness and consciousness. So the human experience oftentimes through these altered states, through these ASCs and these substances, they definitely do tell a story about how we weigh sacredness, and they definitely do tell us and give us the opportunity to have different insights and different experiences of unity and different experiences of interconnectivity. Now, what I think is very, very exciting, what I want to also broadcast pretty loudly, is that probably the first opportunity for this deep unity came from our breath, came from the use of breathing and of breath. And in our history, we've had to do a lot of running, we've had to do a lot of walking, we've had to do a lot of different types of exercise, exertion, physical activity. And it is supposed that the use of the breath and the power of the use of the breath to alter the human experience, to slow down the perceptual experience of time for humans, especially during a hunt or during a stalking or something along those lines of a prey, or of even during tracking periods, we breathe a little bit differently. And during tracking, there can be definitely an altered state that maybe gives us a deeper insight into the nature of the environment we're perceiving and experiencing and tracking, the animal we're tracking. So the breath was definitely connected to shifting of altered states because of our hunting, because of our collecting, because of our practices of exertion and different things along those lines. Moreover, during sexual activities, during reproduction and sexual activities of either reproduction or for pleasure, there's a lot of breath activity going on. And of course, we have pretty powerful high experiences that occur there. Another tradition that happens for a lot of species on this planet is play and dance. So a lot of folks just think that, you know, we humans are dancers, and that's not really true whatsoever. What we know through the exploration of our partners on this planet, the other creatures on this planet, it's pretty rare to find an advanced creature, meaning more than a worm or anything with a real nervous system. With an advanced nervous system, it's hard to find something that doesn't dance. Okay, so there is a lot of creatures beyond just the reptilian world as we move into the mammalian world and on up the spectrum of complexity. Dance seems to be a consistent activity. We see it in birds, we see it in bears, we see it in primates. We definitely see it in other advanced brains on this planet, like horses and dolphins. And uh, primates and different things along those lines, we see dance occurring. We see celebration and movement and rhythmical movement happening and play. Especially we see play happening with advanced creatures. And this gets us breathing. Play is active. Play and dance is an active type of an experience. It's a kind of a rapid moving kind of celebratory activity, and the rhythm of play or of dance also seems to have an effect on our brain and our altered states. So repetitive movements and breathing seems to really have a powerful effect on how our brain waves occur and what kind of altered states can come through. So altered states of consciousness, probably the origins of them for us seem to be maybe linked between this crossover territory between substances like mushrooms and the fact that creatures on this planet dance and play and celebrate. And so it's one of those deals where we suggest in ITB, with this concept of getting into spirituality and what that means, is that one of the most common definitions or frames of spirituality, people talking about spiritual experiences, is through altered states of experience. And that's perfectly appropriate too. That's a way of experiencing the sacred. That's a way of experiencing unity and interconnectedness and awe for existence. And so we totally support that. It's a great, great activity for one to participate in. So altered states of consciousness is the second, probably most more common type of a perspective of what spirituality means. And these different types of altered states can definitely give us the experience of profundity, of being in contact with something sacred, with moving us into a sacred experience and then coming out of a sacred experience. Can definitely give us the experience of being in touch with something that is greater than us, some creative force in the world. So this is definitely a form of spiritual practice, and it's hard to find a religion or a tradition of spirituality, we could also call it. It's hard to find a religion or a tradition of spirituality that doesn't include altered states of consciousness. Other types of altered state or ASC practices are mantra, meditation, walking, rocking, bouncing, spinning, dance activities, once again, breath, and also the uses of substances. You can also get this through any kind of extreme sensation experience of maybe spending a lot of time in heat or spending a whole lot of time in cold, a whole lot of time in uncomfortable, painful experiences. There can be altered states, a very, very long time in specific concentration, like we see in a lot of meditation traditions. So we can experience these ASCs in a number of different ways, and that's also why they show up in a lot of our religious or spiritual traditions that we have on, planet Earth here. So the ASCs are another wonderful way that we experience the spiritual experience. Next up, we have something called stages of consciousness, or stages of awareness, or stages of development. Now, we borrow a lot of this information from developmental psychologists from around the world, and developmental traditions from around the world, I should say. So in developmental psychology, stages of development refer to how a human goes from their infancy through their toddler, through their childhood, through their preteen, prepubescent, into their teenage years, into their adult years, and beyond, into their elder years. What happens for a human being, how they change their value systems, their interpretations, their their faith, so their identification of what is most valuable. So stages of development tell a story about how humans develop. And in the past, probably I would say 50, 60 years, with the more advancement in technologies that can show us how the brain develops a little bit more specifically, what we notice is that a lot of the research that was done by developmental psychologists parallels what goes on as far as brain development from infancy to adult, from an infant brain to an adult brain. And so we see some pretty solid correlates. So a lot of that information coming from those developmental psychologists kind of tells a story about when and how that brain develops, and kind of how that perspective of that individual changes. And we find that with stages of development for an individual human being, we start to see a shift as they go from stage to stage to stage, we start to see a shift of their perspective and the way they experience reality in general. So one of the things we notice is that when we talk about stages of development, especially in a relationship to this conversation of spirituality, this is kind of a touchy subject for some folks because it does speak about a hierarchy type of an experience. But as we go through this, we'll try and enforce the idea that this is not a toxic hierarchy. This is just the evolution of the brain. It's no more of a hierarchy, a toxic hierarchy, than the development, the biological or physiological changes of the brain from infancy to adulthood is a toxic hierarchy. It's just an evolution. Excuse me. It's just an evolution of the brain, and as the brain evolves and develops in different ways, reality changes and shifts for the individual. So traditionally, developmental psychology has talked a fair bit about stages of development, and they talk a lot about this kind of way of who is included in my value systems and how far does my value system extend outwards. And when we talk about spirituality as in relationship to stages of development, we do want to emphasize that the higher we go in that stage of development, when we talk about spirituality, the more we talk about that, the more it is having to do with redefining spirituality and redefining values. So there hasn't been strictly a conversation saying, there hasn't been strict research saying this is how spirituality changes through stages of development. But we've kind of, what happened in the integral movement and what Ken Wilber suggested with the integral theory, in which we kind of are comfortable, which we are comfortable with, is we kind of wiped away some of the maybe superstitions or some of the more religious-based perspectives of spirituality. And we focused more on some of the beginning definitions I put forth in the beginning of this conversation, which is, what does spirituality really mean? Well, it's a sense of connectivity. It's a sense of who you extend compassion to. Where do you find the sacred? It's very much an expression of love and compassion and connection with other things. Now, traditionally, it's higher power or it's spirit guides or it's different things along those lines. But we also notice that for humans, as they develop, their care and concern for a broader spectrum of creatures and beings increases. It deepens, it heightens, and expands. Okay, and it expands. So one of the things we notice is that if you wipe away the conversation of religious or using the term spirit, what you're left with is a human being that originally learns in our human culture, for whatever reason, most of our human culture, for whatever reason, we learn how to extend compassion, how to treat others equally, with equity, how to treat others with care and concern, and how to honor other people's needs and values. Traditionally, that was extended through these spiritual religious traditions, but it doesn't mean they are bound to those, because you don't essentially need to talk about you don't have to use the terms of the spiritual religious experience to express having deep care and concern for another human being. You don't need those words whatsoever. So what we've noticed is that if we strip away some of the, shall we say, biases or superstitions of a religio-spiritual orientation, what we're left with is some common phrases and some common values. But what we notice is that those common values, like compassion for others, like treating things with care and concern and equity, like extending honor and respect to other people's rights and values and different things like that. What we notice is that from earlier stages, that extends only to a certain group. And as we evolve, as we go through stages of development in a functional way, what we notice is that expands. So my compassion and my care and my extension of equity to myself and to others, my honoring others' lives and ways of being, is kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so if we remove, like I said, the biases of a religious language or the spiritual language or the superstitions of a spiritual religious tradition, what we're left with is some very, very, very common values. And what we notice one way or the other, whether you have those superstitions and biases or you don't, what we notice is that that care and concern, that extension of equity to others, that extension of appreciation and honor for others, other lives and other beings having a life, and the way that we approach the world starts to become bigger and bigger, bigger and bigger. So that's what we kind of want to keep in mind as we go on. Now, the reality is that we live, I'm here in Georgia in the United States. I'm in the Southeast. This is a very religiously based culture and community, portion of the country. And throughout the rest of the world, there's definitely the reality, like I said earlier, that we humans definitely use the medium of religion and quote unquote spiritual tradition to deliver some of these stories and to deliver some of these values. So what we want to do is we want to kind of honor that reality, talk about where those occur very strongly at certain stages, and also identify that those become maybe refocused or reorganized as we go through the stages. So the stages of spirituality from a conversation of stage development, it's a little bit more of a complex conversation because you kind of have to understand, you have to know the stages. So we're going to try and go through this as best we can. If you want to learn more about this, you can look up the word of Don Beck and Spiral Dynamics. He does a wonderful conversation as far as a lot of wonderful research having to do with stages of development in cultures as well as individuals. You can look up, man, of course, all the names are jumping out of my head. Who is that gentleman at Emory? There's a doctor at Emory University that does stages of faith. There it is. James Fowler does stages of faith out of Emory University. He's talked about that. There's Kohlberg, there's Cook-Gruder, there's what's his name, Kohlberg. There's all kinds of developmental psychologists that are in the world and done really, really wonderful research. Jane Levenger. There's just several wonderful big names in the stage development world, and they kind of will tell you a little bit more about that information. And honestly, I'm a huge advocate of Don Beck's work. His work is built on the shoulders of a tremendous researcher. He really is really accessible. So if you hop on YouTube and look up something like that title, Spiral Dynamics or Don Beck, you'll bump right into it and you'll see it. And Don Beck speaks well and he applies the work throughout the world. And so he is definitely a resource that's of value if you want to learn more about stage development. So to get back to our topic of spirituality, so consider this base experience of development. Maybe consider our spiritual development at, let's say, around the ages of maybe 10 to 12 years old, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years old. And at this stage of development, the type of spirituality we run into is the type of spirituality that we identify as rules and roles stage of development. And this is going to pull from some of Don Beck's work, okay? We're using his spiral for this conversation. So one of the stages that we're going to look at is rules and roles, and religiosity or spiritual or experience at the rules and roles stage of development is kind of exactly how it sounds. The religious experience is whatever the rules tell you the religious experience is. You go to a church, you go to a mosque, the church or the religious institution you're a part of tells you where the sacred spaces are, tells you what is sacred in a lot of ways, guides you to those sacred practices, and has sacred practices for you to participate in. And once again, I want to make it abundantly clear, none of these stages are fundamentally wrong, okay? Some of the institutions, do they do horrible stuff? Yes, indeed, okay? I don't know one institution of religion that does not have a horrible history or has performed tragic things to somebody else, okay? So it's one of those deals where we have to kind of honor that. And we also have to honor that a stage of development is appropriate for that period or that season of life. So we don't want to look at the rules and roles stage of development and be like, oh my God, what lame spirituality. That is actually a pretty profound spirituality. The rules and roles stage of development for human beings can be really profound because it can give us the rules and the roles of a religion or a spiritual practice can give us the boundaries to rage against, to push up against. So I come from, my world right now is, I have a pretty rich shamanic tradition of my own spirituality. And I also am I also am very much involved in the Rinzai Zen tradition. I'm an integral Zen lay person, lay teacher, and I teach that type of meditation-oriented stuff. I teach Rinzai Zen, Zazen meditation. And when it comes to rules of these types of traditions, of the shamanic tradition or of practicing Zazen, those rules and those role positions are meant for us not to define ourselves by, but to kind of push up against. It's similar to the concept of the crucible. It is a territory. It is a thing that I have to become disciplined in respect to. It's similar to if I'm learning a martial art, a dance, or how to perform a certain physical activity like weight training or doing a squat correctly or doing a deadlift. I have to use the form in order to really create this powerful version of myself. So what we want to do is we want to recognize rules and roles are not wrong. That stage of development is not bad. It just may not fit you at this point in time. And the fact is that we want to honor the value of it and not confuse how humans have made it toxic or used it in a toxic way with the stage itself, because the stage itself is brilliant. Rules and roles teaches us boundaries. Rules and roles teaches us a shared vision. Rules and roles teach us an agreed upon mode of functioning in a world and in relationship to each other. So that's pretty darn important. So the rules and roles of stage development in a spiritual practice is kind of like the spiritual practice of performing an act, performing a form. And that can be a very profound spiritual experience. It can link us back to the lineage that we come from. It can remind us that, for me, I sit in meditation in Zazen and practice that stuff. And I'm like, holy crap, Dzogchen, one of the great founders of our tradition, this is what he was doing. This is what every great Zen master was doing to cultivate themselves. Wow, what a cool thing to be a part of. And they suggest that it was the form that helped them with their experiences and was supporting them in their realization and their wakefulness. So, and this is one that can be helpful for my realization and wakefulness. So once again, it's really similar. Paying attention to the form can be really wonderful for giving us the opportunity to aspire to something and to kind of give us a format for how to grow, and then for us to inhabit it and see how it changes and how it forms us. And also remember that we don't need to identify it. In the Zen or the Buddhist tradition in general, we're not supposed to identify with the forms. We're not supposed to identify with the practices. The practices are there to train us. We're not supposed to identify with them. We're not supposed to confuse our identity for those practices. We're supposed to wake up to our own awareness. So in those traditions and in every contemplative component of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all these traditions, there is a component of it where they talk about this concentration, when they talk about these forms, not getting confused and not confusing the form for what the form provides. And so we have to remember that when we do our spiritual transformation and do our spiritual practice at the rules and roles stage of development. So from the rules and roles stage development, a lot of people identify spirituality and religion as the rules and roles stage development, because the majority of what we could call mainstream religion is rules and roles stage development type of religion, spiritual orientation. If we're talking from a Christian perspective, they may believe that everything in the Bible is true. They may believe that the church is a force of, God on the planet, a manifestation of God on the planet, and can do no wrong, and is unquestionable and should not be questioned. So this can be can be helpful, but also very problematic. So a lot of people identify most rules and roles stage development spirituality as being problematic. And whoever is the main person or the main individual, the main character to identify as the higher power in that tradition, for maybe strict Christians, they'll say Christ. And for Catholics, they may say, they may just refer to God or to Mary in different ways. But for the most part, they've got their specific people, their rules and roles. And for the downside of some of the rules and roles stuff is that their religio-spiritual orientation oftentimes, dictates that anybody outside of that we might not have to treat with as much care and concern. Remember, we mentioned earlier some of the rudimentary values that come along with the spiritual religious orientation is values of compassion to others, compassion to all creatures, is inclusion, is the sense of a shared sense of sacred, a unity with a specific thing, but a circle of care that's kind of defined. And in a lot of religions, especially mainstream religions these days, they have kind of a hiccup with that. There's a little bit of a difficulty with that. And so their care and concern may mostly extend to the people in their congregation and who think their way or identify as their religion. We can see examples of this all over the place. Okay, this is not a hard one to find. This is pretty commonplace. But that's their spiritual orientation. Okay, now it doesn't mean that their religion suggests that, because it really doesn't really mention that as far as Christ and the Bible and all that jazz does not suggest that you only are supposed to care and have care and concern for other quote unquote Christians or people in your church. That's not a suggested practice whatsoever. The extension from Christ was to everybody. You're supposed to have care and concern for everyone. Everyone is a child of God. But unfortunately, that translation doesn't always get extended the way it ought to be. Unfortunately, we see a lot of examples of that. Anywho, moving on from there, from rules and roles stage development, if things go well, what we notice is that the rules and roles spirituality has some hangups, just like every stage of development has. And what we start to notice is that we do get better. If we use the rules and roles stage development, we will start to see a better self, a better awareness start to emerge. And we'll start to notice in whatever territory we're in the world that we can start to angle our favorability and our success. So what we do start to notice is that from rules and roles stage development, it kind of opens up a little bit larger and it becomes a little bit more freedom focused, whereas rules and roles was very much about the church and about the community and about following the rules, as it sounds. We move into territory, we realize that rules are sometimes worth breaking, and there are a lot of rules and a lot of roles to bend, and most roles aren't, and there's no role that we can take that encompasses our total humanity. And so what that oftentimes gives way to is that larger next value system, next spiritual orientation, which we call oftentimes the achievement self. So this is an orange stage of development. This is a stage of development that is really interested in becoming the best self they can be. And they measure their spirituality with how awesome they are. And their spirituality is really oriented towards, if you are trying to become your best self, if you're trying to, embody the greatest life, have the most rich and spiritual, juicy life, if you're really pushing it on a regular basis and achieving success and new heights on a regular basis, this is their spiritual orientation. This is where the sacred is, mostly because it's provided a liberation for them. It's given them greater freedom. More and more success gives them more resources, gives them more freedom. And they've kind of opened up their circle a little bit larger. And that's good. We want that to happen. They've opened up their circle of care and concern and extending equity to others and extending compassion to others. They've opened that up more than just the folks at their church. They've opened it up to a little bit larger. Okay, to anybody who's not only from their church, but now anybody that is kind of in the same stream of let's be awesome, let's make our best selves, let's achieve, let's make a bunch of success and all that jazz. And if you're not working for your success, you're kind of not participating in the religion or the experience of the spirituality. And they're really kind of focused on that kind of an idea. They're very freedom focused, like I said, they're very success oriented, and they're very empowerment. You're going to hear the term empowerment a lot. You're going to hear the term best self a lot, higher self a lot. You'll get a lot of that spirituality of very self-focused, recognizing that my body is sacred, and that the more I care for my body, the more success I can get, the more power I can get, and the more resources I can use to empower myself. And hopefully, from a little bit broader type of compassion extension, the more resources I get, the more I can extend out to other people. Once again, there's nothing wrong with this stage development as far as their spiritual orientation is concerned. There's nothing inappropriate about this whatsoever. There can be hiccups, though, of course. Any of these stages of development can go sideways and get really sloppy and dangerous. So it's one of those deals where the best version of it is it's very empowerment focused. It wants to extend empowerment to others. It wants to make sure everybody's living their best life. And this is that achievement self type of stage of development. Now, we have a kind of a clue about where the next stage of development is going to arrive, which is in the gathering of resources and building of those resources and empowering of self. There can be a motivation, a spiritual motivation that extends outwards towards all beings. I missed one point I really want to pay attention to with the achievement self. One of the hangups for the achievement self, or one of the difficulties for the achievement self that they go through, hold on one second. One of the things that the achievement self kind of goes through that's very interesting is that as it kind of exit the rules and roles stage of development, if it didn't have a good exit from the rules and roles stage of development, it can kind of get a little bit cranky with the rules and roles stage of development, because as it kind of recognizes that those rules and those roles are kind of identified as conforming or as not as empowering to them as they'd like, or freeing of them as they'd like, they sometimes have a tendency to poo-poo that rules and rules stage of development. They will keep what they've gained from that stage of development. They'll then move into the next one. And where the rules and roles of stage of development is very based off of biases and spiritual traditions and superstitions oftentimes, the achievement self is not. The achievement self cares less and less about traditional rules and is more interested in hacks, more interested in cutting edge, more interested in things along the lines that's going to make me more productive. So if biases or superstitions stand in the way of that, they often toss that out the window. And they're very, very, very much into maximizing an efficiency, which oftentimes makes them very interested in rational thought and very interested in the scientific movement. In fact, in spiral dynamics, when we saw the achievement self stage of development really come online, that was essentially the emergence of modern thinking or modernity and the acquisition of science and the push for science and how science and technology can make our lives that much better. And true, it can, no doubt about it. But as we've touched on before, everything's got a downside to it. One of the major downsides with modernity is pollution. That's a major issue. It is not very good when it comes to resources. It sees a lot of the environment as disposable. So do the people who are very entrenched in that achievement self stage development and achievement self stage of spirituality. A lot of things are disposable. So I go to, for the achievement self spiritual person, I can go to a teacher and get what they have and then move on and never look back. So the teaching, the education can become disposable to them to a certain extent. It's kind of like them sitting at a buffet and just grabbing what they want and not really giving any kind of extra thought to it. And definitely not pointing people back to it or like honoring it in some long-term type of a fashion. This is kind of one of the hiccups of spirituality in the orange stage of development. And this can be very, very problematic because it's not very nice it's not very fair and inclusive to some of the people, some of the teachers they've kind of used as objects instead of people along the way. So there's some hiccups that the orange stage development will definitely bump into. So they are very oftentimes without the interests of a religious tradition, or they are very, very often times not interested in the superstitions of things. So you'll see an achievement self person that is very, very certain there is no, person in the sky with a beard that's going to judge you later. They've kind of left that superstition behind. They've kind of left those things by the wayside. And that achievement self type of orientation still has a belief of unity and of a higher power and being a part of something. It's just that the most likely they'll drop certain like I said, biases and superstitions. They will look at a sacred text of any kind and see it as a bunch of stories and information and history to tell them how to achieve more, to tell them how to get better, tell them how to acquire more and achieve more and get more out of their life, or get more out of people, get more out of their experience, whatever they're aiming, whatever more means to them, whatever success means to them. So this orange spirituality is, like I said, a wonderful, rich, fabulous spirituality, because it does remind us that we are bigger than rules and roles. This, what's happening in this human experience, is larger than any one tradition. And so it busts through into this new territory of empowerment, of freedomness, of being able to take from many traditions. And as long as that's done in an honorable way, that's great. Wonderful job. You're now increasing your complexity. You're increasing your diversity. You're increasing your abilities and information and experience. We want that. That's great. And with that, you're extending more care and concern to more people, more traditions, more activities. Great, 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 great. You're also getting rid of a lot of the rigidity or the sicker sides of some of that rules and rule stage development. These are all positive things, but remember, they're not the only spiritual orientation. They do have downsides, and there's something more. So from orange, the next stage that unfolds is what we call the green, or the pluralistic stage of development. And the pluralistic stage of development is founded on the discovery of the orange. When orange matures and gets enough and explores enough items in their environment and gets themselves to a very free, very informed, very successful, very resourced, very capable stage of development and sophistication, what then starts to happen is, and this doesn't happen just at one period of time, it may happen earlier on in the process, but they really get excited about other people, especially the people that don't have those same opportunities as they do. So what we start to see happening is they become very interested in helping people up that don't have the same opportunities. So the pluralistic stage of spirituality is very focused out of compassion, and a compassion aimed towards everyone being able to eat at the same table, everyone having the same rights and equality, everyone is sacred, everyone is a keeper of evolution, everyone is a once again, it kind of looks like rules and roles to a certain extent. Everyone is a child of God, everyone is sacred, everyone is important, everybody's values are equal. And this sounds great, and it is great in actually a lot of ways, because we just came from an orange stage of development that saw people as resources in a lot of ways, that saw compromise maybe as, and giving to other people and sharing with other people as a affront to them, because they weren't able to feel as empowered as they wanted to. So in this spiritual practice, what's exciting is that when orange kind of gets its fill of itself, what it realizes is how shitty it's been to the people that they're standing on the shoulders of. It starts to recognize some of its own privilege and resources and empowerment, and realizes, holy crap, my responsibility now is to make sure everybody else has these same wonderful, juicy life experiences that I have. This can feel condescending if you're the people on the edge, or if you're one of the people that have been were considered an object, or you're one of the people that were just a resource for these people to move forwards. This can feel condescending coming from them. But nevertheless, it is good-hearted. It is meant to create more freedom and more inclusivity. And it is, when we go to that pluralistic stage of development, what we start to notice is that it really decreases a focus on, it really wants to start to call out privilege. It really wants to start to call out how some people have benefited off of the backs of others. And so it really is interested in taking those who have been kind of stepped on, and this equals minorities of any kind, or anybody that's been taken advantage of in order to benefit these folks that are empowered. And it wants them to then have an opportunity for achievement. So that's really awesome. In the history of the US, this stage of development evolving came around like the 50s and 60s, and it was the whole reason the whole civil rights movement and the new emergence of feminism started emerging and has continued to go on. And this was a beautiful shift for our culture here in the US. And so as green kind of comes online, as pluralism kind of comes online, it's really interested in creating a one unified community and making sure if there are privilege issues, we got to solve those in some way. Now, unfortunately, this is, like I said, as we emerge from orange to green, we have more complexity, more influence. We have oftentimes more resources. We are interested in more inclusivity, and we're not really interested in equity as much. We're interested in equality. We want everybody to have the same thing. We don't want anybody to be ranked higher than anybody else. We don't want anybody to be we don't want anybody to be the singular leader. We don't want anybody to be we really kind of poo-poo at this stage of development in spirituality. We want everybody to be in an equal circle. We want to be really, really careful with suggesting that anybody should have power over us. So this is a very complex kind of sticky stage of development, because it's a really beautiful act of compassion and inclusivity and an interest towards supporting other people's needs, especially those that have been kind of trampled on. But unfortunately, it doesn't exactly equate to the nature of life. It doesn't exactly equate to the nature of our cultures, and one of the problems with that is because humans do go through stages. Humans do go through stages of development, and some are at different places. And through those stages of development, every human has their own signature trauma, which means that just because you want everyone to be equal and have the same resources doesn't mean everybody's going to use those resources in the same way. Doesn't mean everyone's going to be interested in being equal in the same way. So there's definitely some hiccups for this orientation of spirituality, but this beautiful spirituality extends not only to rules and roles spirituality and groups, not only achievement and empowerment and self-empowerment, but then it starts to also move out to all peoples, all religions, all traditions, extends out to more and more creatures. So it really is earth focused as well. So whereas that achievement stage was very science-based, very modernity-based, very much like, if it's a resource, let's use it, kind of unquestioningly, the pluralistic stage says you don't need all that stuff. Let's just, like, we've come this far, we've gotten this far, let's return to the earth. We have to take care for the earth because we really screwed the earth up. We really need to care for our environment because our environment is sacred. Our environment is the thing that feeds us. Our environment is the thing that gives us our clothes and our resources. So that is sacred. So I cannot pillage the earth the way I have been from that achievement self perspective. Nor can we do it from that rules and roles stage of perspective of spirituality. The rules and roles stage of spirituality oftentimes sees the earth as this thing that is equated to God, which means that it's never going to end. There's no end of the resource. There's no possible limit because to the earth's resources, because God is limitless, spirit is limitless, creator is limitless. So there's always going to be more oil. There's always going to be more trees. There's always going to be more animals. There's always going to be more whatever. There's always going to be more clean water. And that's kind of like a myth that they live by because of that spiritual orientation. The achievement self sees the earth as this resource that needs to be used now because I got to wake up now. I got to be successful now. And that's kind of a problematic way of seeing the earth and resources in general. And then as we come into the pluralistic phase, they're still interested in their resources, but they want to do those resources and use those resources in a little bit more of a competent, compassionate way because they see those resources as sacred items. So there's a pretty big difference that occurs for that pluralistic stage there. So as we move into these stages, the next one up from green, so I want to move green down here. Next one up from green is what we call an integral. So integral spirituality oh boy, I forgot to emphasize this. Hold on a second. So from that orange stage, oftentimes we see the emergence of what is called agnostic or atheistic orientations. So there's a shift of values towards just being a good person, just being successful, and getting rid of those biases and those biases and superstitions from the rules and rules stage. So oftentimes we see the empowerment people pretty much unbound by religion, unbound by spirituality. Because they're focused on the achievement of themselves and their version of success, they can't be burdened by superstitions. They can't be burdened by religion. They're antiquated ideas for a lot of the orange population, for the achievement self population. And so we see agnostics and atheists really emerging here. Once again, scientific method emerged in as far as our culture is concerned. And we see this huge push towards, if you can't quantify it or qualify it, if you can't quantify it and measure it and use it in some form or fashion of resource, it doesn't exist. So God kind of gets tossed. Spirituality kind of gets tossed. Soul and spirit kind of gets tossed. So in this case, what we notice is that what we have going on is atheism shows up, and the dropping of spiritual terms or God terms occur. And when we move from achievement self up into pluralistic self, what we start to notice is a little bit of a shift. We start to notice the return of some of those things, because we start to identify a deeper unity experience between all human beings and interconnectedness. We start to see systems occur. So we oftentimes can see a more evolved type of a spirituality start to show a value system of sacredness extended out to more things, a sacredness in the resources, a sacredness in the general population and the interactions and relationships that we have. And sacredness becomes, again, another big word in the pluralistic stage of development, pluralistic green stage of development for spirituality, because there's a sense of unity and how, as we work together and work around each other, we can achieve great goals and profound things. So oftentimes we see a return of spirituality, of spiritual terms or religious terms, but with a different flavor. They're no longer in the green. Do they believe that all the stories of the Bible or the sacred books are true? They also don't really believe in other superstitions that oftentimes come up. Now, the downside is that because they have damage at that rules and roles self and rules and rules stage and the achievement self stage, because they most likely haven't done a whole lot of work, and they have some damage around those experiences, they will just simply bring new superstitions online, like they can manifest whatever they want, or through their thoughts they can build whatever universe they want. And if they imagine an experience, it must be real and no one can tell them otherwise. So there's other superstitions we've seen in the green pluralistic stage of development show up, because it's a reemergence of the sacred and an identification of sacred in different places. So they can sometimes bring in unfortunate superstitions from earlier, the tradition of superstitions, and bring them up to that green pluralistic stage of development. And those can be very pesky. Like I said before, every stage is more complexity, every stage is more diversity, every stage is more inclusivity and more experience. So as we hit that pluralistic stage and start pushing the ceiling of the next integral stage, you can have a very intelligent, very resourced, very experienced human being that really doesn't want to hear that they might be wrapped up in some superstition. They don't really want to hear that the thing they call truth might just be their opinion, or might just be a part of their fabrication and confirmation bias about what they've experienced in their life. So it gets a little bit sticky as we go a little bit farther up. Luckily, as we bump into integral, there's a movement away from this concept of just equality, and there's an interest in equality with equity. So there's a recognition, if you don't know what the difference between equality and equity is, what we start to notice is that equality is everybody gets everything all the same, okay? And with equity, what we get is you get access to resources that you need for where you are and what's happening for you in a signature way. So equality is great, but equality with equity is even better. So what we start to notice with the integral stage of development is you'll start to see the emergence of not only the continued practice of equality for all people within a certain construct, but then also equity extended, a fervence and a compassion and a care for equity for all beings. And this is where we start to see, once again, the circle of care just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so as we push into that integral stage of spirituality, I will be honest with you, there's research-wise, it's difficult to pin down what the spirituality for the integral community is. For an integral stage of development, a person who's at an integral stage of spiritual development, it's kind of hard to pin down because of the amount of complexity and diversity we see out of that human being. But once again, the things that we can identify is that they extend care and concern to all humans, great and small, all creatures, great and small, all ecosystems, great and small, and even out into a cosmic perspective. So we've moved from the tribe to my people, to all people, to all people and living things and ecosystems. So you can see the care and concern and how they measure and make decisions just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more inclusive and deeper and deeper and deeper. So how they do their life from this spiritual orientation, this relationship to the sacred, this relationship to a greater creative force in the world, this relationship to this interconnectivity, they are having more of this, they are having a deeper, fuller, richer, more experience of that. That's the usual story we see in relationship with that. And the hiccups are similar to the pluralistic green stage development. There's so much complexity, there's so much life experience and exploration and kind of meshing of science and experience and the mystical experience and altered states of consciousness for these people. It's really difficult to pin down the confusions they have and expose the confusions they have. So it makes it more and more difficult as we evolve to pin down where we are fabricating reality. This is one of the primary reasons, over and over and over and over and over and over again, this is one of the primary reasons why in ITB, our primary foundational practices are shadow work and witness consciousness meditation. Because these two things do wonders in relationship to unveiling where we are fabricating, unveiling where we are projecting, unveiling where we are traumatized and not seeing reality correctly, and unveiling how to find our way through that. So as we go through these stages of spiritual development, as we go higher and higher, there's just fundamentally, there's more inclusivity and there's more partnership. One of the beautiful things that starts to happen, we start to see the beginning of it in orange. It starts to become a little bit more clear in the green or the pluralistic stage of development, and it becomes crystal clear in the integral stage of development, where the spiritual orientation of their higher power is almost like this partnership with evolution, this partner with kind of co-creating the momentum of evolution. Because what we notice is that from very much that achievement self to the pluralistic into the integral, is that we notice that we actually have a great amount of influence on our environment and how we are going to evolve, how humans evolve. We are complex enough and diverse enough in our vision and in our insight, and informed enough that we can see when we put resources in different areas, we can see a growth occur. We can see a performance unfold. We can see a refinement start to emerge. And that puts us right in cahoots with creation, with evolution, with the momentum of moving towards greater complexity and more compassion and more care and more concern. So this can be for a lot of our folks that we could qualify or quantify as spiritual stage development as far as, or I'm sorry, integral stage development as far as their spirituality is concerned. This very much starts to smack of that integral stage. Is look how we can be a partner in creation. Look how we can be a partner in how humans evolve. Look how we can be a partner in creating a world where no one goes hungry, where everybody can be educated, where everybody can follow the refinement they want to follow, where everyone can, with certain application of work and practice, they can achieve certain goals that through the resources that we have availability to. And so from that integral spiritual stage of development, it starts to look very, to the earlier stages of development, starts to look very idealistic. And we all know idealism can be, fraught with trouble. But simply from a quantifiable perspective, at this point in time in history, we can solve all of our planetary problems if we can agree on how to use the resources. There is no reason at our current stage of development on this planet, there's no reason why we can't feed, educate, put a cell phone in every human being's hand and give them access to healthcare and have medicine to go around for every human being, including enriching the life of other species on the planet. There's no reason why we can't do that. The only hiccup is a really annoying one. The hiccup is management. That's actually the major problem, is we have the resources, we have the technology, we just simply don't have the plan or the people to execute the plan, managers. That's terribly frustrating, especially in the face of all this tragedy that's going on. But we truly are, as a culture and as a globe, moving more and more from that green pluralistic orientation, moving and pushing into an integral orientation. There's going to be a lot of hoops we have to jump through before we can actually create that integral orientation community and planet. So these are this is I know this one's been really long. This is the definition of stages as far as what spirituality looks like in each stage. And like I said before, every stage, the orange stage needs the rules and roles stage. Okay, the achievement self stage needs the rules and roles stage. The pluralistic stage needs the achievement self stage. So the pluralistic stage doesn't unfold if the achievement stage is not solidified and put in place, because they don't have the resources. They don't have the self-refinement hasn't occurred for that pluralistic stage to kind of show itself. So each one of the stages needs each other. And none of them is fundamentally bad, but you can find bad in every one of them. You can find trouble and sickness in every darn one of them. So these are our stages of development, and this is how spirituality manifests in these different stages. So it's kind of interesting to think when people say spiritual, they say I'm a spiritual person. The difficulty is like, all right, well, what stage of development are you talking about as far as the spirituality, and what definition are you using? So those things mean a whole lot to us in ITB, because if you're talking about a spiritual orientation from that rules and roles stage, and I'm talking about a spiritual orientation from a pluralistic stage, holy crap, we may talk actually kind of a similar language, but we're not talking about the same thing. We're talking about a fundamentally different experience of spirituality and a fundamentally different level of inclusivity and care and concern in that conversation. So we see this a fair bit, and this is a very difficult thing to suss out. And one of the reasons why in ITB we extend the work of integral theory and Don Beck's work with spiral dynamics, one of the reasons why we include integral theory and stage development is because this is important for our interpersonal journey as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, every stage of spirituality has its value. Rules and roles stage of development has its value. Yeah, hell yeah. It's very important for you to know the rules and roles of your spiritual orientation and have a form to push up against and train yourself in. 100%. It's also wonderful to have a spiritual orientation that speaks to my own empowerment and my acquisition of resources and my use of resources and finding really cool ways to become as awesome as I want to become. There's also that beautiful pluralistic orientation of, man, I've got all these resources and wow, these resources have enriched my life so much. We need to make those resources sacred and protect them and care for them. But we also need to make sure every other human being has access. Anybody that's ever experienced, subjugation and ridiculous, shitty prejudices, we got to make sure that shit ends, because that's not cool at all. And we got to make sure everybody can move up, and that's a dehumanization of those people. So we have to get them into an equal territory, and we have to extend those resources to them. We have to make sure everybody can live their best life as they want to and be in communion with each other in that context. So these are all very, very, very valuable spiritual stages and value systems. but at each one of them, there can be hiccups, and each one of them are built off of each other and need each other to function really, really well. So these are some ideas that we have, or this is a lot of the reason why we do this work in ITB and identifying this stuff, because we want to know how those stages evolved inside of us. If you got a lot of resentments because of your rules and roles religious experience, as you move into your achievement self and your pluralistic self, spirituality, you're going to bump into those hiccups. There's going to be problems with it, because like I said, the orange is built off of, or the achievement self is built off of the rules and roles. And if you haven't settled some of the resentments you have at the rules and roles stage, as you move into the achievement self and the pluralistic self, you're going to bump into problems. You're just going to find the damage you have, and there's going to be hiccups. That's why we do our shadow work in ITB. That's why we have stewards in ITB. This is why we do coaching in ITB, because there's people that have gone before you, and we support you and point out, hey, there can be hiccups here. Hey, this sounds like shadow. Hey, this sounds like there's resentment there. So this is how an ITB practitioner can be really helpful for any human being wanting to take this great journey. Sorry, my throat's getting a little bit dry. The last one I'm going to talk about briefly, we don't have a whole lot of time left. The last one I'll talk about is spirituality as a line of intelligence. So already we've talked about intention, or the tone or the momentum of as a spiritual orientation. I go to things with an intention of being spiritual. We've talked about altered states of consciousness, which is always associated with the integral concept or integral map of states of consciousness. So in ASCs, we can have deep, powerful spiritual experiences. So altered states are very common as far as the spiritual orientation. That's another mode that people use it. We just got finished talking for a long period of time about stages of development in spiritual orientation, how each stage has a different spiritual orientation, different value system. And now we come to lines of intelligence. Lines of intelligence also shows up on the map of integral, or the integral map. And lines of intelligence were identified, I think it was early 80s, mid 80s, out of Harvard University. I can never remember the doctor's name that does it. I apologize, person. Doctor found it out of Harvard University and said that, hey, each human being has anywhere between 12 to 24 specific lines of intelligence, and each one of these lines of intelligence kind of is measurable and also is teachable. So most of us know of the IQ, which is the intellectual quotient, that the IQ only measures 3 lines of intelligence. And has to do with like mathematical, logical experiences, engineering, and ability to memorize and regurgitate in science, and different things having to do with science and mathematics, having to do with that kind of fun stuff. And so it really doesn't speak to the rest of our humanity. It doesn't mention emotional intelligence. It doesn't mention interpersonal intelligence happening between yourself and another person. That doesn't mention intrapersonal intelligence, which means your ability to self-regulate and feel your own self and feel your own awareness, internal experience and thought process and emotions. It doesn't talk about social intelligence. It doesn't talk about spiritual line of intelligence. It doesn't talk about your musical line of intelligence or your kinesthetic line of intelligence. So there's, like I said, 12 to 24 different types of lines of intelligence. Each one of these lines of intelligence exists in every human being, barring brain damage or something along those lines, of course. And in each one of these lines of intelligence, we all kind of come in with a certain kind of proficiency in them. And depending on our household that we were raised in, and the guardians and their lines of intelligence probably trained up certain ones as we aged and moved into adulthood. And it also means that every line of intelligence can be trained even farther. So just because maybe you got medium to low line of intelligence having to do with emotional intelligence doesn't mean, and you're maybe at age 24, 25, 26, doesn't mean you still can't age up and you still can't refine and become more intelligent in emotional intelligence. It just means you have to continue to educate yourself and practice and learn. So what we found is that any line of intelligence can be trained, any line of intelligence can be honed. That's pretty awesome information. The other thing we want to know, especially for this conversation, for spiritual line of intelligence, is that there are certain lines of intelligence that combine to make other ones. So you can have, and social intelligence is a great example. So in social intelligence, we see a combination of cognitive line of intelligence, which means I can take other people's perspectives and I can see from other people's points of view. in social intelligence, we also see an emotional intelligence showing up. I'm able to monitor my emotions and also identify emotionality in other human beings and maybe even decode that relatively well. I have interpersonal relationships, which means I know how to phrase words, I know how to say sentences, I know how to quote unquote read the room or read a person, read body language, maybe notice micro expressions, maybe notice tone of voice and stuff like that. And there's other lines of intelligence that contribute to our our ability to communicate to another human being and receive information and messages from another human being. So the same thing goes for spiritual line of intelligence. And spiritual line of intelligence actually kind of has some similarities to social line of intelligence in the fact that it does include some different varieties. So what we see in spiritual line of intelligence is that we see a ethical and moral line of intelligence is included in the spiritual line of intelligence. A certain amount of social intelligence or inter and intrapersonal intelligences are present. So the ability to not only interact and share information and use words and participate in the conversation and translate your experience, but then also how to feel and the complexity of how you feel your internal world. So that's inter and intrapersonal intelligences. We also see what's called the cognitive line of intelligence is important here, as you can probably imagine, because seeing another person's perspective, the cognitive line of intelligence is pretty important because it does give you that other person's perspective and allows for you to include that other person's perspective in your choice making. So I often talks about the steal from Wilbur, and he often talks about the cognitive line of intelligence having to do with who, excuse me, who's in your circle of care. So the bigger your circle of care, the higher your cognitive intelligence. And of course, that would very much be associated with with your spiritual intelligence. So spiritual intelligence, what we start to notice is that the spiritual line of intelligence is a very specific line combined with other lines of intelligence, and it has very much to do with how you articulate and how you talk about and how you include different perspectives and experiences. If this sounds similar to the stages of development, it is, because the lines of intelligence are defined by levels of development. Okay, so each line of intelligence goes through a developmental line. So we could actually combine stages with lines, and we see stages of development becoming more inclusive and more complex and more diverse, and we would see the line, specific line, moves through that level of intelligence. So oftentimes Wilbur talks about them as lines and levels, but there is very much a line of intelligence having to do with spirituality, and it's distinguishable and it's trainable. That's also something we want to keep in mind as we do this stuff. So these are the 4 different types of spiritual definitions and how people use spiritual. And as you can see, some of them are starkly different from each other. And so the way that this can be used in an individual and in a practice is the fact that if you learn these different definitions of spiritual, the way people use the term spiritual, way we use the term spiritual, if you become more aware of these things, it gives us the opportunity to work them a little bit. It gives us a resource to use instead of just kind of milling around thinking that everybody's term of spirituality, and in fact, my own terms of spirituality, are the same as the other definitions. Instead of mashing all the definitions together and just calling them spiritual, we start to see this distinction start to emerge. And if spirituality is of importance to you, it gives you an extra edge in giving you the opportunity to hone that spirituality, to develop your spirituality, which is sometimes a taboo topic in some circles, but you can develop your spiritual line of intelligence. You can develop your spiritual practice, and you can use spiritual practices in a different way, in a little bit more of an informed and conscientious way. So if you look at this altered states relationship to spirituality, we can say I use all ASCs in order to dip into that cosmic, powerful, altered state experience of my own spiritual story. and I use that and I have those experiences, and then I bring them back and I try and bring them to the definition of intentionality or momentum. I then take that deep unity I might have felt through the altered experience. I may bring it to more and more of the things in my world. So when I do my relationships, I bring that sense of connectivity, that sense of intimacy, that sense of unity, that sense of profundity to my relationships, to cooking my food, to caring for my dog, caring for my body, caring for my relationship to my lover. And as I do that, as I consciously make that choice to do that, I can start to see how through stages of development in my spirituality, I can see where there might have been hiccups, and I can see kind of like a trajectory of where I'm going, and also what I need to clean up. So this can be extremely empowering for an individual who wants to evolve in this way of spirituality. Another really beautiful thing that I've noticed along the way of working with people is that in the context of the stages of development with spirituality, a lot of people move into that atheist perspective, atheist or agnostic perspective. And because they had a really crappy experience, maybe even tragic experience with the rules and roles traditional church or religious community that they're a part of, if they had a very tragic, traumatic, crappy experience with them, they will resent and full on reject anything that even smells, has a hint of a sense of spirituality. And they can kind of disown that part of themselves that is associated with feeling unity, feeling community, feeling that sense of profundity and awe in relationship to the cosmos, in relationship to existence, how profound this situation is. And instead of moving into that sense of profundity, they move into a sense of cynicism and deflating the universe into, it's just a bunch of chemicals. It's a machine. It's a bunch of, stars moving here and there, planets move this way, this, those, that. There's no beauty in it. There's no such thing as beauty. There's nothing juicy about it. There's nothing, there's nothing special about evolution. There's nothing special about us. Everything is deteriorating. And they kind of only see a small portion of modernity and only see the small portion of the spirituality of science. And the spirituality of science, the rest of it is this recognition. I mean, watch Neil deGrasse Tyson, I might have butchered his name there, Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about science, and you will see he's a spiritual guy. He's speaking in a very spiritual way. He's in awe. Every great scientist is in awe of the nature of the universe, the nature of the natural world. They are in awe of it. It's just like this amazing thing. And that's one of the reasons why they're such a good scientist and that they pay attention so well. So we want to keep in mind that we don't want to toss the baby with the bathwater, is what I'm kind of getting at. So when people move from that rules and roles and push into that next stage, if they only identify spirituality with those terms, they can oftentimes, with the superstitions or the religious rites, they can sometimes toss out the basic fundamental quality of spirituality, which is community, which is unification, which is interconnection, which is awe, which is the acknowledgement of what a rare and precious event this is. And so it's terribly interesting to create this opportunity for people who consider themselves atheists and talk about, well, if you don't want to use those terms from that religious tradition or spiritual tradition you come from, what are your terms for awe? Where do you see awe? Where do you ever feel this great interconnectivity and this shift, this evolution that's happening to you? Are you aware that you are a partner in evolution with evolution itself? Are you aware that you are evolving, that you can mark that and that you can control it, which makes you a partner in evolution on this planet and in the cosmos? So how they respond to some of those questions gets very exciting. So another beautiful thing that we see with this conversation of defining spirituality and how the spiritual term is used as far as stage development is concerned is that it may give permission to that person to be in awe again. If they've been, very cynical, very much the cosmos is automatic, or natural world is automatic, and there's nothing to be inspired by, there's nothing to be in awe of. And it's kind of like this reductionistic view. It does give us sometimes the perspective of, all right, well, that's all well and true. I see where your perspective is. But the other question is, how do you feel deep connection and intimacy with other human beings? How is it for you for you to feel connection and interconnection with, you know, the plants you care for and for the animal you raise, because there is an interconnection. That's the scientifically valid theory, capital T theory. We have strong interactions with each other, social interactions that are verifiable and quantifiable. So are we tossing the baby the bathwater here? What's going on? So like I said, it can sometimes, with this kind of conversation of spirituality, it can sometimes open the door again for a person that's had a really crappy experience at rules and roles and is in a modernity kind of pluralistic place, for them to include that concept of, oh, it is all right for me to feel a unification with other people. It is okay for me to feel an interconnection with, you know, the ebb and flow of my culture and of life. Oh, wow, it is okay for me to feel this sensation of being a partner in evolution, not only of myself, but if I'm raising kids, I'm partnering in evolution for my child. I'm partnering, if I'm part of a community, contributing to my community and culture, I'm contributing to the evolution and cultivation of that, what's it called, of that group, of that culture, of our community. What a powerful experience. And can I give myself permission to feel the juiciness of those experiences? So this kind of stuff, when we talk about this in ITB, it kind of evens the playing field, kind of creates an opportunity for us to actually have a conversation instead of just infighting between stages. And it gives us an opportunity to actually hear each other and understand where each other is coming from. And this is a big reason why we include integral theory in ITB and make sure that we become versed in it, and we educate our clients on integral theory, because it just gives us more opportunity to actually be humans. And if we are interested in profundity, in being in awe, in connecting with each other and connecting with an ecosystem, a community, a group, if that's something of importance to me, and having and recognizing that I am sacred, that I am worthy, that I am precious, if I can honor that, that's your spirituality. How you do that is your spirituality. We don't have to call it that if you don't like that word, but that's essentially what it is. And so this is a valuable way to kind of like expand the dialogue through the whole spectrum of human experience and create more continuity, more unity between the stages and between the groups of human beings around the world. So we love ITB, we love integral theory, and we love how this kind of comes together. So that's our information for today. I am very, very grateful for you participating. All right, so thanks again for joining us. This has been ITB Sunday School, May 17th. This has been our edition of the 4 different ways that spirituality has been used in the definition of spirituality. And please, if you have more questions, find us at, if you have more information, if you want to find out more information about us at ITB, go to embodyingitb.org. Look at our website and check us out there. We will be back here next Sunday. Every Sunday from noon to 1:30, 2 o'clock is going to be Sunday School. We have different topics coming up every week. Our next topic, let me get this out. Our next topic next week is going to be really apropos for what we're dealing with right now. It's going to be grieving, mourning, and carrying the dead. So that'll be our next installment. That'll be Sunday the 24th. We do these guys via Zoom, and then we post them on YouTube. So if you missed it, if you'll miss that one, or if you miss any others, you can watch those as you like. We also have other options coming up. We do Tea Time with Koshin. I do Tea Time with Koshin every Monday through Saturday at 3 p.m. live on Facebook. And then we also do Mondo Monday every Monday from 6 to 7:30, and that's a Zoom as well. And you can find all that information on our website and on our Facebook page and Instagram page. Just look for Integral Transformative Bodywork on both those platforms and you'll find us. All right, once again, thanks again. If you enjoyed this, please donate. We will have links for that in our, we take PayPal and Venmo. We'll have links for that in both our newsletter on our pages for that. So please, if you can, that's a wonderful contribution to us. Everything goes to ITB and contributes to our continued programming and our opportunity to serve the community. So we much appreciate anything you can give. Take care. Have a lovely one. Be human, be messy. I wish you rest. I wish you be well fed, and I wish you plenty of care and concern in your world. All right. Take care.